I was out in East Orlando one time. This was not that long ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And I got lost. And I realized I was going the wrong direction. I turned in a residential street, and then I found out I was in a long residential street, and it was a fully developed 1960s subdivision. But as I found my way out of the subdivision, I saw 3 vacant lots, completely overgrown like jungle. And I said, you know, there's 3 currency lots there. I wonder how much. I wonder if those people, they couldn't live here. They would keep the property cleaned up. It's amazing that the neighbors don't make them clean that up. I went back to the office. I'm a very curious person. I looked them up. I looked that property up on the tax rolls, and sure enough, the people that own it, or the woman that owns it's in West Virginia. And I called her, and I didn't get her, but I got her husband. And I said, you want to sell those 3 lots? And he says, well, we might. We're probably never going to use them. And I never found out why they had bought them in the first place, but they owned them. And there were 3 residential lots, but they put 1 decent-sized house on them. So he said, she called me, and I said, how much you want for them? She says, what will you pay for them? And I said, well, the assessed value, and actually I cheated her. I was looking at the assessed value for the year before, but I didn't realize it, and they had gone up. I said the assessed value on them appears to be $4,000 a piece, $12,000 altogether. She says, sold. Well, even at the assessed value, that's, you know, even I didn't know it was last year's assessed value. I thought it was this year's. But even at, you know, even if I'd been paying this year's assessed value, it would have been a pretty good deal. Now, I don't buy residential lots. I'm not going to build a house on it. So I called a broker friend of mine, Bill Calhoun, and I said, you know anybody that buys lots? He said, yeah, me. He says, you got some, you know, you got some infill lots? He says, I'll build, you know, I'll build a house once in a while. I said, sure, look it up. This is the tax roll number. He called me back and he says, how much you want for them? I said, well, they're assessed for $4,000. He says, I'll give you 6 apiece. I says, I don't know. He says, look, that's all they're worth. I said, okay. Okay. So I called her. I said, you got to do it. So, you know, I do a lot of stupid stuff in my spare time. I also work crossword puzzles and play Sudoku, but it doesn't usually earn me as much money. Yes, go ahead. No. I just flipped my contract. In fact, I didn't even have a contract at the time. I flipped the interest that I had. He's a friend of mine. I said, okay, I've got them bought for $4,000. You pay me $6,000, and we got a deal. Yeah. We didn't even have a separate contract. He sent the contract to her. And he paid her $4,000 and gave me $6,000. Non-profits are like churches. Sometimes they end up with property, any kind of nonprofit. I work with a couple of foundations locally. And the real estate editor is just it doesn't even true of me anymore because I don't know the real estate editor anymore. But for years, the guy in the paper, the guy that was the real estate editor here was a friend of mine because I had taken a thorn out of his paw one time. One time, he needed some information badly, and I just happened to have it and gave it freely. And then, I don't know, 2 or 3 months later, I needed a press release for something I was doing, and I sent it directly to him, and boy, he printed it word for word. So after that, this is like 30 years ago, I guess, 25 or 30 years ago. And so then I made it a practice to, anytime I heard something that I didn't think, you know, some piece of real estate gossip I didn't think he knew, I'd call him up and I say, hey, you know, I might check with Dixon Ticonderoga. I think they might be moving to Orlando. Really? Oh, great. You know, and he called the business editor and they got a scoop.